Hi, everybody. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, Texas, on Tuesday, February the 21st, and welcome to our commentary. I want to begin today referring you to a post that I have over at the American Thinker this Tuesday morning. It's available at the American Thinker, or you can see it on my blog if you follow me on my blog. And it's a post about school choice. Now, I've said it many times. I believe that school choice is going to be a major political issue in the 2024 campaign, presidential campaign. And that's because the public wants it. If you look at what's happening across the country, if you see the rebellion on the part of parents who have kids in public schools, and the rebellion comes in different ways. It isn't just because they're angry that they're talking to their kids about homosexuality and gender equity or whatever. It comes in many other ways too. A lot of it has to do with the fact that the public schools are not performing. The public schools are simply not performing. The kids graduating in many school districts across the country are simply not graduating with the skills that they will need to go out and get a job, the skills that they will need to compete in a very tough competitive environment. Mathematics, reading and writing, just basic skills. We're not talking here about having a master's on history. We're just talking about basic skills, especially mathematics and writing and reading skills. And our students in many school districts are not graduating with those basic skills. And I think a lot of parents are simply saying this is a dead end. We're putting all this money in every single year in property taxes, however we pay for education in our state, and we're just not getting the results that we believe we should be getting. So the school, it's all being driven by a tremendous action with what is happening in the public schools. And in my post today, I talk about an example of a teacher, and there's so many different teachers across the country who are engaging in bizarre behavior, and that's just making it easier and easier for the school districts to be able to push or to drive a lot of parents into school choice. Again, I think this is a movement. This is a political movement that I believe will blossom into a major reason as to why you could see a Republican winning the presidency in 2024. The problem with the Democrats is that they're basically carrying the water of the school teachers unions. They're not accepting the fact that the school districts are not performing. I mean, if you had a Democrat, for example, who would say, "You're right, these schools are not performing, and we got to do something about it," then maybe that Democrat might be able to present an argument. But all they're saying is, "Well, school choice is going to take away money from public schools." That's true. It is going to take money away from public schools because public schools are not performing to the level that they should. So I believe, as I mentioned in my article, that school choice is going to be a major political issue in 2024, and whoever the Republican nominee is should be very well positioned to win on that issue across the country. Now, if anybody wants to see how you win with that issue, just take a look at Virginia and take a look at the campaign that Glenn Youngkin ran for governor in Virginia. That was his issue. And the whole point of that issue was the parents need to have more say on what's happening in education. And so I really believe this is going to be a major plus for the GOP in 2024. Well, some of you may have seen the images coming out of Ukraine where President Biden was over in Ukraine. He made I guess, a surprise visit. I don't have any problem with President Biden going to Ukraine. I really don't. I think in the overall scheme of things, I want to see Russia lose. I want to see Ukraine kick out the Russians. I want the Russians to lose. So that's why whatever help we can give Ukraine, it's fine with me. Let's give them help. Here's the problem that I have with Mr. Biden and what he's doing, President Biden. Number one, he hasn't really explained to the nation what exactly our mission is. Giving Ukraine money is fine. You can discuss that. But what exactly is our mission? What is our overall mission? And we really haven't gotten an explanation. Also, another big failure of the Biden administration is that he has not explained to the American people why success in Ukraine matters not just to the people of Ukraine, but to the American people and the people in the West. I think there's been a failure of communication on the part of the Biden administration here, communicating a reason as to why we should be doing what we're doing. And I'm not opposed to it. I'm willing to support Ukraine. Now, I also think, by the way, and that's the second problem that I have with President Biden, he needs to go to Congress. And there needs to be a debate in Congress about this. And Congress people need to go on record one way or the other on this. So far, because we're basically using NATO or whatever other reason we're using for helping Ukraine, the Congress is not on the record. And I think there needs to be a debate. The country should hear what Congress has to say about this. And there ought to be an up and down vote on whether or not this help to Ukraine should continue. If you remember back in 1991, back in 2003 or 2001, the first President Bush and the second President Bush went to the Congress and they asked for a resolution. The first Bush was a resolution to kick Iraq out of Kuwait, the Gulf War. And the second President Bush was a resolution on Afghanistan and later Iraq. Whether you support these actions or not, that's not really my point. But the fact that they were willing to go to Congress and get a resolution, that's what this president needs to do. We need to have a resolution. We need to have a congressional resolution on what we're doing in Ukraine. We don't have that. We don't have that. And I think President Biden, honestly, is exposing himself politically if something goes wrong in that part of the world. He would be a heck of a lot better off politically if he went to the American people through the Congress and tried to explain what this is all about. Now, the other problem too with President Biden is that here he is in Ukraine. Here he is talking about protecting pensions in Ukraine. And he hasn't been to Ohio, where they just had an unbelievable accident, an accident that has left the community in very bad shape. Has never been to the border either. That doesn't help him either. So it just looks weird for the American people. I mean, there's a tone deaf type of governing here where you don't go to you don't go to Ohio, you don't go to the border, or at least substantially to the border. What he did, that little stop on the way to Mexico City, that's not what I'm talking about. A substantial visit, or where he tells his vice president, you're going to get down there and you're going to live there until you fix this thing, or until you give me some recommendations to fix it. So that's the problem here. The problem here is you have a president in Ukraine who seems more interested in Ukraine than his own people in Ohio or his own people on the border. That doesn't make any sense politically. That doesn't make any sense politically. It reminds me of that expression. I think it was Tip O'Neill, Speaker of the House, who once said, all politics is local. It's exactly right. Everything is local. Everything is local. And people want their president to care about them. People want to see their president care a great deal about them. And in this case, the absence of President Biden is sending the wrong message to Ohio and to the border. And the message is, I don't have time for you because I'm busy with Ukraine. No, that politically is a disaster. One quick note I wanted to bring you, and we're going to get into a show later in the next couple of weeks. We're going to try to do a show about this. The latest numbers that we have is that remittances to Mexico have exceeded $50 billion. Now, remittances are generally families, Mexicans in the United States who send money back to their families in Mexico. And that figure has now passed $50 billion. And that is an unbelievable number because it's been growing substantially over the years. And what these billions of dollars are doing, frankly, is they're taking care of families in Mexico. So instead of having to depend on the Mexican government to provide a safety net for many of these people in Mexico, it's being provided by their relatives or their sons or brothers or whatever living in the United States, who are every month, sending roughly $50 billion to Mexico. That's a lot of money. That's a huge number in the Mexican economy. And I have a lot of questions about that. And that is, how can you develop a healthy economy when you've got that kind of dependency on people who are living overseas? That is a question that nobody seems to be asking the Mexican government. But your cash is coming in into Mexico, and the cash is not really developing the Mexican economy. It's simply subsidizing people, and again, some kind of welfare state or some kind of a safety net. Not the wisest thing to do, to say the least. I understand the love of family and all of that. I understand that. But this $50 billion is not being invested in Mexico. It's actually subsidizing people or supporting people in Mexico. That's not the best way to invest in a country. It was 51 years ago today that President Nixon went to China. And of course, those of us who remember the whole thing, China was a much different country 51 years ago, if you remember the images on TV and all of that. And, China over the years, if you remember the video images that came out of Nixon in China, you had people in bicycles and there weren't any tall buildings. And it was literally a third world country. I mean, really unbelievable. When you look at China today, of course, you have a much different country. You have a country that is expanding economically, a country building up its navy, its army, a country sending balloons to the United States. So I think a lot of people are wondering, was this the right thing to do? Now, I think when Nixon did it in 1972, he was thinking about dividing the communist world between the USSR and Red China, as we used to call it. But I think there may be a time right now for a little rethinking about China policy, because China has become an enemy of the United States. And China is a very ambitious enemy of the United States, as we see their military expansion, their marine expansion. I mean, they're sending ships all over the world. They're looking for partnerships all over the world. And they're not looking out for the United States. They're looking out for China. And we are going to have to realize that this is no longer that poor country that Nixon visited 51 years ago. This is now a superpower that, in fact, wants to compete with us at the level of superpowers. So I hope our leadership in Washington realizes that this is a very dangerous China that we're dealing with in 2023, not the third world country that President Nixon went to in 1972. Thank you for listening. This is Silvio Canto in Dallas, and we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye, everybody.